So I'm Suzanne Shelton. I'm going to do a little bit more of an intro here in a minute, but it's my job to bring the consumer into the room today because all this amazing stuff we're doing to make composting happen, make it real, at the end of the day, if we don't engage the consumer, if we don't get them to participate in it, then it's kind of just a cool idea that doesn't really get traction and doesn't become the way we do things around here. So that's my job today, is to bring the consumer into the room. To tell you a little bit more about who I am and who my firm is, you already heard we're the country's leading marketing communications agency entirely focused in sustainability. Why we do what we do is to create a market advantage for the organizations that are creating a sustainable future. So y'all go out and do good things for people on the planet. We tell the story and help you gain a market advantage, which really means driving brand preference, driving sales, attracting and retaining employees, and even improving investor outcomes. How we do that is that we survey average humans twice a year. We've been doing this for 19 years now, and we're asking a whole lot of questions around people topics, planet topics, packaging, chemicals, et cetera, everything you can think of under the umbrella of sustainability. And we've been doing this in America for 16 years and now globally for 3 additional years. So we've actually got 20 years of data now. So I'm going to walk you through a lot of that. A key for the slides that you're going to see. All of this is quantitative data, y'all. It's a plus or minus 2% margin of error on any of our questions. If you see a globe in the top right corner, it means it's a global answer. If you see an American flag, it means it's an American answer. And while knowing some stuff is cool, doing something with it is a whole lot cooler. So the idea is that you take all these insights, as we do, you unpack them, and you understand, okay, if they think and believe all those things, then what does that mean for the brands they prefer, the products they will buy, the behaviors they will change, and their general perceptions around sustainability. All right, so we're going to dig into sustainability, packaging, end of use, and claims. So we're going to start with context before we get into packaging. So first bit of context is around climate change. 85% of people around the world believe not only that climate change is happening, but that it's caused by human activity. And that 68% in the US, let me unpack that for you. Because right now, in this political moment, that is the highest level of agreement we've seen in like 16 years of asking the question. By the way, 68% does not mean that 32% don't believe. About 13% don't believe. Everybody else is in the middle, meaning, I think something's happening, not really sure whose fault it is. What we've seen happen over the last 20 years of asking this question is that that middle has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and more people have gone into the, yep, it's real. So given the belief and given the concern, it's not surprising then that 72% of people around the world say they are extremely interested in hearing from companies about their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, for as freaked out as they are about climate, it's not even in the top 3. When we test a bunch of different issues, most of which are environmental, but some of which are things like economic, political unrest, et cetera. So just other things that we're concerned about. When we test all these things and we boil down to, like, what are the top 3 things people are most concerned about, climate doesn't even make the top 3 in any of the countries where we ask. But you'll see something relevant to your world that does, which is plastics in the ocean. You might even think water pollution, air pollution, et cetera, use of harmful chemicals. So people are concerned about the packaging that they are interacting with and that's being produced and put out into the world every day. They're concerned about chemical content in the things we consume. They're concerned about having access to clean water, clean air, et cetera. So as freaked out as we are about climate, we're even more freaked out about these other issues. And frankly, I can tell you, for years we've seen that people are more concerned about plastics in the ocean than they are about climate change. And they're concerned about climate change. In fact, in this country, 86% of people say they are somewhat to extremely concerned that the packaging they use is going to end up in the environment. So no matter what they do, no matter where they put it, do they put it in the compost bin, do they put it in the recycling bin, do they put it in the trash, no matter what they do, it's going to wind up in the environment. And that's both a problem and an opportunity for all of us in this room. The theme I wanted to set up, though, here is that, we're concerned about a lot. We're kind of freaked out about a lot of things. And y'all, sustainability and compostability is not a thing in a vacuum. We might be thinking about that amid all the other things that we're concerned about. So we can't ever look at it as just a thing in isolation. It's in connection to all the other things that we're thinking about. But because we're worried about it, it's not surprising then that most people actually do want to be eco-friendly and buy that way. 75% of people around the world want to be seen as someone who is buying and using eco-friendly products. So that's not, do you think companies should make eco-friendly products? Or do you think eco-friendly products are good? No, it's about your personal identity. How do you want to be judged by your friends, your family, your colleagues? How do you want to be judged? And people are saying, yeah, I kind of want to be judged as someone who's buying eco-friendly products. I want to be on the good side of this, the right side of this. And in America, by the way, that 46% number 11 years ago was 33%. So we have seen this move in an upward right direction. So raise your hand if you can think of a time when you have purchased or not purchased a product based on the environmental or social record of the manufacturer. Can you think of a time when you have purchased or not purchased? Yep, most of you in the room, and y'all are exactly the right audience for that. And in our surveys, a lot of Americans raise their hand and say, yes, I can do that. Yes, I've done that. But the follow-up question then is, okay, name the brand. And up until 2015, that math worked out to 6%. 6% of people who could say, yes, I am that person, and I can actually cough up an example of when I've been that person unaided. We don't give them a list. We ask them to give it to us open-ended. But in 2015, we started to see the number spike, and today, globally, 44% can name a brand unaided that they have purchased or not purchased because of the environmental or social record of the manufacturer, and here in the US, it's 32%. In 2015, it was 6%. Okay, so we've seen tremendous movement in people literally putting their wallets where their values are. And the way you ought to interpret that is that people are moving in this direction, and we want to give them a way to express their values through their purchases. So for all of their work to buy based on their values, at the end of the day, they are really looking to companies to solve many of our biggest problems. 76% of people around the world hold companies strongly to very strongly responsible for making changes that positively impact the environment. And that number is 61% in the US. So for all that I'm going to do, really, I'm looking to companies to solve all these big environmental and social problems we have. And when it comes to end-of-life disposal, so very much in your wheelhouse, 83% of us say that companies should have very much to extreme responsibility for end-of-life disposal of their products. And that's 69% here in the US, as you can see. As we break it down to packaging, 73% here in the US say companies bear responsibility for packaging disposal. So basically what people are saying is, look, I want to be seen as someone who's buying eco-friendly products, but it's up to y'all to make them, and it's up to y'all to deal with the end of life of them. So don't just put me on the hook. I mean, 83% say, sure, individuals have some responsibility, but companies have responsibility too. Stop telling me I'm supposed to recycle and then recycling isn't available. Stop telling me I'm supposed to compost and composting isn't available. So we have to work with them to make this happen, or else they're just going to roll their eyes at any of our claims, any of our promises. They're just going to be like, yeah, whatever. You can say it's compostable all day long, but there's nowhere to compost it, so what am I supposed to do? So we don't want to frustrate them. We want to engage them. We want to bring them along. Because right now, they don't think companies are doing a very good job. Only 16% say that companies are doing a great job of ensuring their packaging waste does not wind up in the environment, and 50% say companies are not doing well at this at all. You might not be shocked to hear that companies have a different view of this. When we survey companies, what you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide is companies think they're doing pretty well on this, whereas, again, consumers do not. So y'all need to align how you're doing with what the consumer thinks, because at the end of the day, they're the ones we've got to engage to put products in the place where we want them to put it so that it can have an appropriate, sustainable end of life. So they want to buy from good companies. How do they get that message? How do they know they're buying a good product from a good company? Well, it really is all about the package. Cue number one is just generally what the package says. So the top 3 ways a consumer decides a product is green comes down to packaging, A, the details, like the ingredients, they're flipping it over and looking at that nutrition label, or the messaging on the package, like the label tells me that it's green, or certification from an independent third party. So we ask about multiple labels, y'all. I'm afraid we did not ask about BPI. We'll start adding BPI into the stream. We ask this question about every 3 years. So we'll add BPI in next time. We ask who are the best ones, and we do give them a list. Here's a list, who are the best ones, and then who do you trust the most? And it's the same. Like, if I think you're the best, I trust you the most. So ubiquity breeds trust, basically, because these are all the ones they're familiar with. Another way to look at it is like this, and the logos will be little, but you'll get the idea. It's like USDA Organic and Energy Star are far and away. There are so many eco logos that consumers kind of don't know how to make sense of them all. They can't keep track of them all. They don't understand them all. So it does take ubiquity, and it takes marketing. So if we want BPI to be recognized in the same way that Energy Star and USDA Organic are, we got to get it everywhere, and we got to promote it. All right, so that's thing one, is what the package says. Thing two, in terms of how do they know a product is green, is what is the packaging and what's going to happen to it at the end of life. Now, 21% of people in our survey say they compost household waste, including 16% in the US. This pales in comparison to how they feel about recycling. Like, basically, everybody thinks recycling helps the environment. And basically, everybody thinks recycling is the bare minimum we can do for the environment. And further, almost everybody says recycling makes me feel better about the amount of things I purchase or consume. So in other words, the average human's mental model of eco-friendliness is recycling. If I'm going to be eco-friendly, I'm going to recycle, or I'm going to buy recyclable products. Why is that, y'all? Why is this the mental model that most of our friends and neighbors have about eco-friendliness, that it simply is recycling? It's what they know, would you say? Yes, so it's what we have fed them. Y'all, we fed them this for 40 years. Walk into any grocery store this weekend, and you'll see some sort of recycling message screaming at you from like 60,000 different products on shelf. I mean, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. This is the message we've given them. And so literally, we have said to people, don't feel bad about all that stuff you buy. Like, please keep buying all the things. We need you to buy all the things because we got shareholders and we need to sell some stuff. So please keep buying all the things. And when you're done with the things, you're just going to put them in the blue bin. And those things are going to go to a magical place called away. And then when they're in away land, they will become something else, and you don't have to feel guilty. And most of us have bought it. This slide tells us, yes, I don't feel guilty about all that stuff I buy because I'm just going to recycle it, and it's going to be awesome. Except that there is a boogeyman under the bed, and that is in the form of disbelief. 30% of people around the world are not confident that what they toss in the recycling bin is actually recycled. And numbers like that, 43% in Germany, are shocking because they have an outstanding program. But yet 43% of people there are skeptical that what they put in the recycling bin is not being recycled. The US, that 32% number, good news, bad news, this data is from 2023. We have 2025 data that has not been fully calculated yet, but I can tell you we stayed at 32% in 2025. So we didn't get any worse, but we didn't get any better. The downside is that 6 years ago, that US number was only 14%. So 6 years ago, only 14% of people thought that their recyclables weren't getting recycled. Today, a third of us think that. So one more thing, only 29% of us are actually confident that what they put in the recycling bin is actually getting recycled. So a third of us don't believe it's getting recycled. Less than a third of us believe it is. Everybody else is somewhere in the middle. And this is a problem. Because remember what I said earlier, that 3/4 of us want to be seen as someone who's buying eco-friendly products. We want to be seen as eco-friendly. That's how I want to signal to the world the kind of person I am. All right, so that's how I want to be seen. And if my mental model of that is recycling, so I want to be seen as an eco-friendly person, my model of that is recycling. If I now believe that recycling doesn't work, that whole thing falls apart. Like, how am I going to signal to the world that I'm a good person if recycling doesn't work? So this is a kind of existential problem that then also speaks to engagement, because not shockingly, if you believe that recycling works, you're a lot more likely to recycle. and you're likely to go out of your way to recycle. And this plays to composting as well, y'all. You could extrapolate this and assume the exact same thing, I think, about composting. That if they believe it works, then they're more likely to engage with it. But if they don't believe it works, yeah, why bother is the message here. Because we have several states considering EPR legislation, and because for a long time we've had that data point that I showed you earlier, where a high percentage of people say companies are responsible for the end of life of products and packages that they make. Companies are responsible. Like, we've kind of been bothered by that. We've seen that stat for years, and we've kind of been bothered because it's like, as the consumer, like, I have the thing. So how is the company that made the thing supposed to be responsible for end of life? How do consumers see that? So we went out and asked earlier this year. We did a whole study just kind of on EPR issues. I mean, a consumer doesn't know what EPR is. They don't need to know. But we wanted to kind of get underneath that. And we asked open-ended, and we also asked with a list. So I'm going to show you the list first, and then you'll see some of the open-end comments. We asked, what are the things you think companies ought to be doing to take care of end of life of their products and packages? Because we know consumers want companies to be responsible for end of life of packaging. So we asked, what do you think companies should be doing? And we gave a list. What do you think far and away came to the top of the list? Glass, somebody said? Interesting. Less packaging, that's definitely in there. Biodegradability. Now, what they saw, the phrasing they saw was offer products in biodegradable packaging, meaning they can eventually break down in nature if they get into the environment. This plays right to their concern. Remember, 86% of people in this country think that no matter what they do with their packaging, it's going to wind up in the environment. So we interpret this data point. We don't have the qualitative to tell us, but we interpret this data point as they're saying, look, if my stuff's going to get out in the environment, please make it so it just breaks down into the earth and it doesn't harm sea creatures, it doesn't form permanent litter, it doesn't create microplastics. Like, let's just make it return to the earth, please. So that gets us to the question of, who are these people? Well, they're well-educated, a little bit more likely to be Caucasian. Otherwise, they look like the rest of Americans, except for one big difference. 88% of this group thinks that companies bear responsibility for end of life of their products and packaging, while only 73% of general Americans think that. So this group, the people who most want companies to make biodegradable packaging, have the highest expectations of companies about end of use. All right? So the very people that want biodegradable, and y'all, we're going to use biodegradable in this context also as a bit of a proxy for compostable because people don't often understand the difference. These are the people that have the highest expectations. So they want something that's going to break down at end of life, and they have the highest expectations of companies to make that possible. When we ask open-ended, what should companies be doing to better manage end of life of their products, you see kind of a cry for help here. They ought to make disposal easy. They ought to help me with disposal. They ought to teach me about disposal. They ought to reward correct disposal. At the end of the day, the message I want you to get from this is that people want what you want. I mean, they want things to have a natural return. They want to use more environmentally friendly products, environmentally friendly packaging, and they want it to return to the earth in an ideal world. So they want what you want, but we've got to motivate them to take action. We can't just make the products compostable and not engage the consumer. Like, they're not going to put the product in the right bin. They're not going to go out of their way if we don't bring them along and show them, no, it's working, and here's how it's working, and here's your part, and here's how we can make it easy. So we've got to address the infrastructure problem, but we've also got to address the engagement problem. We've got to engage the consumer. You've got to engage the consumer to think differently about compostables and behave differently around compostables, and that's how you're ultimately going to create massive change. All right, so let's recap. As I've said, people are concerned about many environmental issues. They want companies to solve those issues. And their promise back to you is, look, y'all solve all these problems, I'll buy your products. So that's how they're thinking about it. They especially hold you accountable for solving the end-of-life and packaging waste problems. They think companies need to do a better job at that. And they're looking for specific signals on pack. They're looking for specifics like third-party certifications. They're looking for recyclability, but their faith has been shaken. And boy, they really want biodegradability. And I bet if we unpacked that a little bit more, we could help them see the difference between biodegradability and compostability, and we can make compostability favorable as well. So we can motivate people to prefer compostability and even motivate them to compost, but we're gonna need a concerted communications effort. All of y'all in this room are small and mighty. Together, you are a powerful team. We've done many, many, many coalition campaigns over the years, and I will tell you that the message is so much more powerful and stronger when you pool your resources and you go in together on one clear, simple message. You can change opinions, and you can change behaviors, and you can move compostability forward.